what's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Let's Grow podcast. Today's a season opener, obviously, but I'm excited to be back. It's been a while. We haven't talked since before halftime huddle, and that was intentional. So I like to take time every summer to pull back and to really get quiet. I live a very structured life, if you will. I am kind of a type A girly. And so everything's, routines and discipline and all the things. But I've been in a season recently where God is calling me to not rely on those things, but to really be sensitive to what He wants to do. And sometimes that's rest. And so this summer, what I thought would just be me being quiet or really taking a deeper dive into cutting out all the noise. We got TV, social media, YouTube, all the things, even sermons and podcasts and all of that. That's a lot of noise. And I like to read as well. So even reading for me is noise in a way. And I thought that I was just pulling back from all of that. But I did not know that God was using this summer specifically to teach me about my position as a daughter of God before anything else. And so we will get into that throughout this season. But today I want to specifically talk about Egypt, or the wilderness season, because I think that for us, and when I say us, I'm referring to believers, like people that follow Christ, it is very easy to roll our eyes at a wilderness season. Or when we think about Egypt, we just kind of think about what took place when they came out of Egypt, but we don't think about Egypt as an actual mindset. And I have been really pulling back the layers of what it means, or what Egypt represented, I should say, in the Bible. And so today we're going to talk about how sometimes we want God to change our circumstances, but He's actually doing a work in us. And sometimes that takes longer. Deliverance can happen in a moment, but transformation happens over time. We always talk about Romans 12, being renewed by the transformation of our minds. Is that what it says? Yeah. I don't know why I'm questioning that. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I've been talking a lot about survival mode, if you follow me on social media, and that's intentional. I'm noticing it more in other people, but it's something that I lived in for a very long time as a busybody, as I used to be. And I want to talk about what happens when survival becomes our identity, and God uses it I'll say God uses the wilderness to introduce us to ourselves in a way. And so we are going to talk about the exodus of the Israelites. And so in Exodus, it opens in 1 and 2 about how Egypt was a place of provision. It was a place of assignment when Joseph was there. And I'm not going to say we all know the story of Joseph in the Bible, and how his brothers sold him and he was in slavery, and then that was a whole journey essentially to where he becomes number 2 in command in Egypt. And then after he dies and there's a new pharaoh in town, they began to see the people of Israel as threats. And because of that, they began to oppress them. And so what was once a place of provision, a place that people came to receive, a place that was an assignment for him, right? It became oppression and survival mode because people were just trying to survive. And so for them, they had to adjust to that. They had to adjust to those changes, because essentially they went from being free and provided for to being enslaved by circumstances and the new pharaoh in town. So today when you hear me use the word Egypt, I am talking about seasons, environments, systems, relationships, all the things that we had to adapt to survive. And I want to talk about how sometimes survival becomes our identity. And it takes a while for us to write that, flip that on its head. And so this is the season opener of this season, but this season we are going to talk about the Exodus a lot because the Cultivate Her Retreat is coming up. It is an Exodus experience for a reason. I believe that before you can cross over into anything new, a new identity, a new season, a new way of being with God, you have to leave something. And most of the time that is Egypt, right? And most of us know we're supposed to leave. Like, you know that you cannot stay here, but you also don't know where to go or how to go. Some of us feel stuck. Some of us feel like I would rather the known familiar evil than the unknown. And some of us are scared. And so when we talk about Egypt, I want you to think about it not from a physical place perspective today, but as a posture, as an identity of survival that you build when you want to adapt to whatever situation you're in. And so in social work, we talk about survival adaptations. That is like the way that our nervous systems and our identity and our behavior reorganize around a threat in order to get you through it and to get you to survive it, right? And so those adaptations are not weaknesses, but they are very telling. They are very intelligent. And so your body and your psyche will do exactly what it needs to do to make sure that you can stay alive. Because in your mind, the fear is, I don't want to die. I just want to get out of this. I just want to get through this. There's light at the end of the tunnel. We always talk about stuff like that, right? And so the thing about that is survival adaptations, they don't really expire when you get to safety. Like, you have to manually program yourself to come out of that normal, because the threat might leave, but your adaptation has become your default. And that means that you can leave Egypt. It can release you. You can be gone, but you can still be living with that slave mentality. And for some of us, obviously, it's not like slaves like they were the Israelites. But for some of us, it is performing. It's shrinking. It's waiting for the other shoe to drop. It is always protecting yourself and being on guard and relying on yourself, self-reliance, right? Because that's what Egypt taught you to do. And so I want you to think like, okay, well, I don't really know where she's going with this Egypt thing. Let's talk about a few identities that you can come out of Egypt with. So you might be the strong one, because when you were in Egypt, your weakness wasn't safe. It wasn't safe for you to be weak. You had to just put it all together and do it, right? But then you got your sister. That's the one who handles it. She takes care of big business, right? In Egypt, that's because they had to fight and fend for themselves. They weren't able to have help. Like, help was actually frowned upon, Or you got the one who earns her place. This is that striving I was talking about. This is that performance. It's one of those things where your presence was conditional. So you've trained yourself to say that if I'm not good, I don't get attention. If I'm not good, I don't get good responses. It's a conditional thing. Or you're the one who stays small, because when you're too much and you do too much and you be too much, it has consequences to it. And so you play small. You hide in plain sight. You just kind of skate on by and you shrink instead of striving. And then there's also the person where you already know how this goes and you know how it ends, because at one point you did have hope and you did have faith, but it costed you too much. And so now you don't have hope. There is no language of hope. You don't really believe that there's more to it. You think that this is where it ends. And so I don't want you to think, when you listen to those, the strong one, the one who handles it, the one who earns her place, the one who stays small, the one who already knows how this ends. Those aren't character flaws. They were strategies that you used to survive whatever your Egypt was. But you are not that strategy. You don't have to take that on as your identity. You see, in Genesis 1, we were called image bearers. We weren't called any of those things that I just listed. And so We have to be mindful of taking on what the world has called us and not taking off what God had already designed for us, right? And the danger is like when we build our identity around a survival season, we essentially close ourselves off to receiving anything that contradicts that, which would be growth, right? Coming out of a survival season, you would come into a place of freedom. You would come into a position of freedom, a posture of freedom. But if you are stuck in survival mode, we call them fight, flight, freeze. I'm missing one. Flee, I think. No, that's flight. I don't know. I'm missing one. But when we list those things off, your nervous system is clicked. Like, that is where you are. And it will stop you from receiving anything. Nothing will go in. It's almost as if you close the door in your nervous system. And so then you side-eyeing people that actually love you, or you feel guilty when it's time to rest, or you feel like when you are receiving a blessing of some sort, you feel like it's a trap before the next tragedy. You're always waiting on that shoe to drop, right? And all of those things are survival mode. That is how you've lived to kind of just get by rather than thriving with God, right? And so I don't think we talk enough about the fact that Israel was delivered overnight, but they didn't go straight into the promised land. They didn't go from being a slave to being in the promise. There were some things in the middle of that we all know, right? That wilderness journey was no joke. That wilderness is where the identity you got in Egypt starts to feel like this is who you are. You are out of that environment, and yet your mindset is still there. And so in the wilderness, you are not yet where God has promised and where he's told you you'll be, or whatever that is. You know, people have different promised land perspectives. I would say essentially in the will of God, right? In that in-between place is where your identity is confused, because you are presented with a choice. You're actually presented with the opportunity to just stay who you've always been or become who you've always supposed to be. And so it's uncomfortable that your brain starts looking for familiar things, because it's like, this ain't what I'm used to. But the thing about that is that the familiar that you know is Egypt, which is still not right, but it is the only thing that's familiar to you. And that's why people go back. We wonder why people go back to situations that do not serve them. It's because it's the evil that they know. It is a familiar danger that feels more safe than an unfamiliar freedom. And so they're not doing it. They're not going back because Egypt was good to them. It's because they know what to expect. I know what to expect. It's conditional. If I do this, then I don't do that. If I don't do this, then I get this, and whatever that may be. What I like about the definition of wilderness that Michael Bethany gives, he defines the wilderness in his book as a place where there is no human interference, where God removes every competing voice, every support that you would get from like an earthly person, resource, or anything like that, and also every illusion of self-sufficiency, so that he alone, God, becomes your source. That makes me think about Hosea 2, where God is talking about, Hosea says, but look at what God does in the wilderness. He doesn't rush her through. He allures her. He speaks tenderly. The wilderness isn't punishment. When you hear that, that feels more of an invitation. That feels more like an opportunity to spend time with God. As crazy as it sounds, because when we think about wilderness, we think no water, heat, no like food, no resources, anything like that. But God sees it as an opportunity to speak to us without any other outside interference. And I love that perspective. I don't like being, obviously, we don't really care for being in the wilderness, but it is one of those things where I'm like, I didn't never thought about it that way, because sometimes we can think that the wilderness is a punishment season. It's not. It's actually the place where God tries to reintroduce me to me, or you to you, before he hands us anything new. And so it's not that he's withholding the promised land. It's more so that he is preparing us for it so that we don't bring Egypt into that. And we go back to our original design and his original intent for us and all the things that he's entrusted to us. And so I think the shift that I had to make in my most recent wilderness season was about, instead of saying, when do I get out of this? I had to start saying, am I letting God show me? Or am I letting God rename me and remind me of my identity? Because he gave me an identity before Egypt ever did, right? And so I think about even how they used to have names in Egypt that they would give you. Like they would give you a different name than what your original name was. And so for us, our survival mode seasons will give us names like survivor, right? Like you survived. Or resilient. Black women hear that so much. We're always called resilient. We're always called strong. We're always called, I say survivor, right? And the thing about it is, that's true, but that's not my first name. That's not the name that God gave us, right? Before we were in Egypt, before the wilderness, before the survival season that we go through as humans, God called us image bearers first. And so for us, we have to keep that in mind, because that will shift our focus to go from me, self-reliant, self-doing, to, okay, how can I be more like Christ? How can I look more like you each and every day? Not from a striving perspective, right? Because we talked about that. Not striving, but just coming back to my rightful position and my rightful identity that you gave me from the jump. And so this is when I kind of think about the fact that as image bearers, we are daughters and sons of God. I know not a lot of men listen to this, so if I say daughter, please don't get offended, y'all. I just know I'm talking to these ladies right now. But like for us as daughters of God, we have to remember that we received the spirit of adoption. Romans talks about that. We were not given a spirit of slavery to go back into, keyword back, to go back into fear. We were given the spirit of adoption. And that means that we have access to God, not based on our performance, but actually based on our position as his daughter. It's based on our belonging. See, your survival season, your Egypt would tell you that you have to earn your place. Conditional, right? Remember we talked about that. But our Father is telling us that we already have a place and that we are to be seated in that place. And so let's talk about leaving Egypt, because that is the hard part. We will get right to the edge and be like, I know that I'm not supposed to be here, but I don't know how to go from here to there. And it's scary. It can be the most daunting thing to step out of what you've always known, to step into something that's new and unknown. And it'll look scary because it's like, what if it's worse? But what if it's better, you know? And so for us, that doesn't really look like a moment. I would say that it is a decision in our heart, and then it is an intentional practice. So even though you may step out of a season physically, let's say you move to a new location, or you start speaking up for yourself more so you're no longer shrinking or anything like that. This is when you have to notice the difference between what you used to do and what you do now. And so that's where you have to think about, like, okay, am I striving for approval, or am I just doing this because I get to, because I can, and because I'm supposed to? There's always a difference. I think that we have to intentionally practicing leaving those things behind, consistently being transformed by the renewing of our mind, just as Romans 12 says, every single day. That's a practice. Like, I'd like to say you can be delivered in a moment, but transformation can take a process. And I know people don't like to hear that because we don't like processes. We don't like waiting. We don't like to wait on God, right? We think that we can take care of ourselves, and in a way you can, but if you are his daughter, why would you not allow him to take care of you, you know? And so leaving Egypt is an intentional practice. It's something that we have to consistently remind ourselves and consistently interrupt our thoughts and recognize those thought patterns and put them on trial. Was this from God, or was this from my past? Was this discernment, or is this hypervigilance and trauma? Because that'd be a whole nother thing, but we're not going to get on that. I just think that we have to keep in mind that leaving Egypt is a process. And so this season, as we continue to talk about the wilderness, we continue to talk about the Exodus, we continue to talk about moving from one place to the other, stepping out of survival mode and stepping into your next with God, not just for him, but also with him. I'm excited because in October, this fall, 25 women are going to come together for the Cultivate Her Retreat. We will be right outside of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And it's an Exodus experience. My intention is that we would journey through 3 days together to leave Egypt, journey through the wilderness, and really rediscover our identity as a daughter, understand our position and dominion, and recognize that we are both disciples and we partner with Christ to deliver our brothers and sisters in Christ. And so these are things that we are going to leave, right? Leave that journey with. But I want to talk about what you might be bringing in. And so if you have been experiencing survival mode, burnout, you've been questioning your identity, you have been in a place of striving and performing for God or for people, because those are different, but if you just know that there is something else on the other side and you know that it's time for a change, I would like to see you come. I would like to see you bring all that you need to bring, and we're going to leave it there. We're going to journey together. And this is not going to be like anything I've ever done. We talk about conference, and conference is great. I love the impact of conference, but I think that this is us really getting in the dirt and cultivating together. I think that this is going to be one of the most transformational experiences you will experience. I think that it's time for us to plow up the fallow ground of our heart and allow and make room for God to plant the seeds that he's always intended for us. And so if you've been feeling that pull, it's time for something to change. Like, I can't keep living my life like this. Then you're in the middle of something. Maybe God is trying to invite you in. And maybe you can't join us at the retreat, but he's inviting you into your own season of Exodus, your own season of reintroducing you to yourself, shedding the layers of the identities that you've had from what the world has told you, what your experiences have taught you and conditioned you to be, but to actually show you who he always intended for you to be. I want you to pay attention to that. Like I said, retreat may not be for you, but maybe this particular time and season in 2026, or whenever you're listening to this, God is inviting you into a journey. And so pray about it. If you do feel like he's calling you to join us on the retreat, the link will be in the show notes. It will be at thecultivateco.org, and we have several different options. The biggest difference is how many roommates you want, but this journey is going to be amazing. And I don't say that from a place of aesthetics or status or anything like that. I just know what it's like to rediscover who you are with God. And I cannot wait to see other women have that same experience, even more, honestly. And so I hope that you enjoyed listening today. This is just a little tidbit of what we're going to be unpacking over this entire season. We're going to be talking about that 3D framework of our identity as a daughter, our position in dominion, and our assignment as a disciple and a deliverer. But we're also just going to be talking about what an Exodus experience is. What does it look like to go through a wilderness? What does it look like to rediscover God's love? And all the things. I'm not going to give it all away, but I know that this season is for women who are ready for change. And so if you're not subscribed, this is the perfect opportunity for you to hit subscribe so that you can see every video that we upload from now until retreat, which is in October. And so I want you to think about this as we leave. Journal it, pray about it, talk to God about it, talk to your family, your friends, your community, your accountability about it. But I really want you to think, what did survival mode teach you that you're still holding on to? And what does that look like to release it to God? And so I want you to sit with that. I'm not going to give a super tight close. I am just going to give you space to think about that. And I hope that your week is amazing and that I will see you back next week in the comments. Please let me know what you thought about this episode and what you're looking forward to this season. And if you feel led to share your answer, you can also drop that in the comments as well. But thank y'all so much for listening. Don't forget to grow in every area of your life. Peace.